welcome Professor Hans Hock, today's guest of honor, my esteemed colleagues at CIL Mysore, and virtual participants and friends. Oh, madam, you have come in. Okay. Uma man,
Yes,
you
yeah.
can start.
Sorry, I lost the connection for a minute. That something happened here, and yeah. Good evening,
Yes.
everybody. I for 2 minutes I had no connection. Yeah. Anyway, good evening, everybody. I hope people can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Pawan, are we? Can we go live, Pawan?
Please go.
Recording. Can you start recording, please? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It is the Navaratri time here, and it's the 7th day. I'm very happy on this auspicious day. We have a wonderful person with us, Professor Hans Henrich Hock, who is a very good friend of CIL and of India, of course. We are very happy to have you as the speaker in the 53rd Foundation Day lecture series. I welcome you to India virtually and to be with us this evening and for you. I'm very happy to also welcome the distinguished professors. I see many of you here, Professor Jaishilan, Professor Amritavalli, Professor Sachdeva, Professor Shalendra Mohan, Professor. I'm very happy to have friends from Nepal, Professor Yadava and Professor Dubinanda Dakal. And I'm sure some more are watching on the YouTube. It's indeed a great pleasure to welcome Professor Hans Hock to this talk series. Many of you are familiar with him. Nevertheless, I would like to introduce him formally. Hans Hock is Professor Emeritus of Linguistics and Sanskrit of the Classics of Germanic Languages and Literatures and in the campus honors program at the University of Illinois in the United States. He is a well-known figure in general historical and comparative linguistics, comparative and diachronic syntax of Indo-European languages. He has worked extensively on many Indo-Aryan languages, Sanskrit, Germanic, Latin, and also on various aspects of Sanskrit linguistics, Vedic, modern spoken Sanskrit, convergence phenomena, clitics, prosody, and the phonology syntax interface. He has several noteworthy publications, including Principles of Historical Linguistics. As most of you know, he just recently completed his 3rd edition and revision and updated the same, I believe, only a few days back. Like when we approached him to deliver his talk, earlier, he just said he is very busy with the talk, with revision of his book, and that we have to be waiting for a while. And I'm really glad, like now he has done that magnanimous work, and he has already submitted it to them just recently. Professor Hock has a very impressive CV, as you know. He has been working on various aspects of linguistics, held various positions. For example, in addition to what he is doing now, he has been the editor, Folia Linguistic Historica, publication of the Societas Linguistica Europea, member the editorial board of Folia Linguistica Historica, member of the editorial board of Journal of South Asian Languages and Linguistics, advisory editor, Trends in Linguistics, a major book publication series in linguistics, series editor, The World of Linguistics, editor, studies in the linguistic sciences. Of course, back in 1960s, he was also instructor of German. He had held various teaching positions, invited teaching positions in India. He has been a visiting Fulbright lecturer in JNU. I believe it was in the late 80s. And also in Delhi University, 2005, March 2005. Invited instructor in the refresher course or a workshop on historical linguistics for linguistic instructors at Indian universities. This was hosted by the Central Institute of Indian Languages. I think Professor Sachdeva was here. It was during January 22nd to Feb 2009. And I remember coming all the way from Shillong to just say hi to Hans and other colleagues here during at that time. He was also an instructor in 2011 on another workshop at the CIL. That was also a refresher course, which was again hosted by, I believe, Professor Sachdeva. That was on workshop on language contact. And he has held various other invited positions. I already told you about his research interests also. He has several honors in various interviews and in conferences. He has held various positions and he has been awarded with different recognitions. I would like to mention a few here. He was awarded honorary life membership by the Societas Linguistica Europea, honorary degree of D.Litt for outstanding contribution to historical linguistics by Deccan College in 2018. He was an awardee of Sukumar Sen Memorial Gold Medal for his work in general, historical and comparative linguistics and Sanskrit by the legendary Asiatic Society, Kolkata in India. Several other, he is an elected fellow of the LSA, class of 2013. He has been listed in German Indology in various years, 1984, 88, 96, 2000, 2005, 2007. He is listed in the Who's Who in the Midwest, Who's Who among America's teachers as well, Vice President, World Association for Vedic Studies. Quite a bit. I mean, it's a very long CV and different achievements are there. To keep it short, I would like to say that he has co-authored several books, the most important being, of course, just we talked about the Principles of Historical Linguistics, which is widely referred by almost everyone working on teaching or learning historical linguistics. He has co-authored 3 books, edited 9 volumes, several journal issues, journal articles, and book chapters are numerous, hundreds of them, 116 I could count. I stopped counting after that. So we have many more and several articles, publications, technical reports, and I think he's also, his 3 more works are in preparation, I guess. So he has a book proposal with Camille Hammonds on language, history, ideology, the use and misuse of historical comparative linguistics. Quite a bit of, it's a very impressive CV. And now we are waiting to hear from him on switch reference in South Asian languages.
Thank you very much. This has been.
I formally invite Professor Hans Hock to deliver his talk in this series of Foundation Day lecture series of the CIL.
Thank you very much for this not too long introduction. I very much appreciate all the good things you have said about me, and I hope I won't disappoint you. I've been at CIL from 1973, which is the first time I came there, frequent visitor, as you, of course, mentioned. And so it's a great honor to participate in this series, and I hope that the paper that I'm reading today will be of interest to you. So as you can see, I'm talking about switch reference in South Asian languages. And let me start with the issues. First of all, converbs are a major distinguishing feature of the South Asian convergence area. This is well known. They may have classical subordinating function, as in example 1, where Ishtva subordinates to the Eka Hasyad in the second part of the sentence in 1a. And they may also be closer to verb or verb phrase coordination, as in 2a, where we have alochya, gatva, santoshya, aniya, all carrying the action forward till finally dritaha gives the resolution of the sequence of actions. Similar phenomena, of course, are found in other South Asian languages. I often give examples, for instance, from Tamil. And this whole phenomenon has been referred to often as clause chaining. Now, a special function of clause chaining can be that as narrative linker in tail-head linkage, as an example 3, where we have the first sentence ending in shushruvuhu, they heard, and the next sentence picks up on shushruvuhu with a converb shudva, and then goes on some hishrata. So you can see that this is something which is found in Sanskrit, and of course it's found in other South Asian languages too. At any rate, here we have an example from Konda. There has been a continuing debate as to whether converbs in Sanskrit and Indo-Aryan in general result from the influence of Davidian or other languages or our internal developments. This is not something I'll be talking about today, but rather I focus on the discourse use of converbs and other devices in South Asian languages. Now, tailhead linkage is not limited to South Asia. It's widely found in folk narratives around the world, even in ancient Greek. Usually, converbs exhibit same subject control, including oblique subject control. In Sanskrit, we have to specify it as agent, that is underlying subject control. And the often implicit subject or agent of the converb must be identical with the subject or agent of the matrix clause. This is well known. In Sanskrit, of course, the agent of the matrix clause may be marked in the instrumental following the rules of Sanskrit syntax, as in this example, repeated. Now, inexact or sloppy control by other constituents does occur. So, for instance, you can get an example 4 from Sanskrit, where there's a rare type of example, where gatva is governed by tubyam, which is the dative recipient of the verb da, to give. Or there may be limitations to inanimate subjects. For instance, in 4b, we have inanimate subjects not being the identical with the major matrix subject in this Tamil sentence in 4b. Now the question arises, given the prevailing subject or agent control of converbs, what happens under the same syntactic and discourse conditions in which the converb is used if the subjects or agents of the subordinate and matrix structures are not the same? Many languages here have switch reference with a systematic marking contrast between same subject structures and different subject structures. For South Asia, studies of switch reference are generally limited to tribal or minor languages. There is no comprehensive discussion of switch reference in South Asian languages. The purpose of this paper, then, is to show that switch reference seems to be widespread in South Asian languages, even though uncertainties remain, and to suggest that this is an area for interesting and fruitful future research by hopefully some of the people who are listening to this talk. So, a brief outline of the talk. Section 2 briefly discusses switch reference, both sentence internally and in discourse. Sentence 3 focuses on Munda, Tibeto-Burman, and Burushaski evidence for switch reference. Section 4 is dedicated to Indo-Aryan with 3 languages present, Sanskrit, Hindi, Urdu, and Palula. And section 5 examines possible parallels in Dravidian. Finally, section 6 sums up the findings and questions for future research. So let me start with a brief characterization of switch reference. It's a special type of clause chaining characterized by different verb marking depending on whether the chain clauses have the same subject, SS, or different subjects, DS. See, for instance, example 5, which comes from a Native American language, where 5A gives the same subject marker, ch, which then makes it the whole structure read as he danced and sang, he being the same for both verbs. Whereas if you have switch reference, the different subject marker, then you have he danced and he sang, somebody else sang. The phenomenon was first recognized in Native American languages, has been noticed especially in languages of the Americas, of Australia and New Guinea. In same subject constructions, converb is being used most of the time, but in different subject structures, different strategies are found. One is a special converb-like marker, as in 5, repeated, where the B example has a converb-like marker for different subject. There may be also nominalizations or verbal nominals. These will be highlighted later on. And also conditionals, or what are called conditionals, but often are really conditional temporal structures. And again, these will be mentioned when they come up. Switch reference may play a role in discourse or tailhead linkage. And so, for instance, if you look at example 6 from Guttop, you can see that in B, we have the continuation of 6A, and 6A ends in the verb godzki wiginin. And this is picked up in 6B by godzki wigina. And here, na is a different subject marker telling you that a different subject follows, namely the kids, the fact that there are no clothes available to the boy. So let's look in South Munda, Tibeto-Burman, and Burushaski. Starting with South Munda, which is where Anderson has made a major study in 2007. Here we find switch reference with same subject used in markers used by converbs in 7a. In this case, the marker is su. And in example B, we have the marker na, indicating that it's a switch again in reference. Robust evidence for switch reference is found in Guttop, Remo, Kta, and also in Gorum, but the markers are different in Gorum. And there are traces in Zhuang and perhaps Korea. North Munda, on the other hand, does not have different subject markers, but it does have a cognate of the South Munda same subject marker, chi, used as a converb. Anderson proposes to reconstruct the South Munda situation for the proto-language and reconstructs, therefore, a same subject marker, chi, and a different subject marker, na, which may be a suffix or clitic. The assumption then is that North Munda lost different subject marking. Anderson provided a fair amount of examples from other languages around the world, but none from South Asian languages. So this might wrongly create the impression that this is a phenomenon unique in South Asia to the Munda languages. As I will show, this is not the case. So in Tibeto-Burman languages, we have a language, for instance, Chamling, which uses the marker n to conduct a series of actions of the same agent, while the marker pa, with or without lo, signals a subsequent topic shift, as in 8a, where we first start with the same subject marker, rungane, and then go to 8b and switch subjects and have the different subject marker pa, senyi pa. A similar situation is found in Shigatse in Western Central Tibetan languages, where ne is used for same subjects and pata for different subjects. And Haller points out that the different subject marker is probably a nominalizer pa plus a conjunction ta. For Kam, D. Waters provides further evidence of a similar situation where the same subject is marked by a converb marker in the, But the different subject marker has an interesting characteristic. It also uses the converb, but it adds to this a marker, a pronominal marker, which indicates the different subject in this clause. So the or here marks third person singular. I ate before he came. And this is an interesting kind of variant on the way that different subjects are marked. The most recent study that I'm aware of is by S. Waters for Zonka, where we find converbs generally using the marker te or the for some same subjects, and for different subjects, the nominalizer W is found with the suffix the in narrative clause chains. Burushevsky, too, has evidence for switch reference in Berger's comprehensive study, where we find that same subjects are marked by converbs, as in 10a. Different subjects are marked commonly by the infinitive, a verbal noun, or a verbal adjective in M, and this is the case in 10b. But there's yet another variant for different subject marker, which also uses the converb but adds a particle ke. This is the case in 10c. So yet a different way of marking different subjects. Let's now turn to Indo-Aryan, starting with Sanskrit. Earlier publications, and they go back to the 19th century, focus on tail-head linkage phenomena, either the ones which involve different subject marking or same subject marking, but they don't put the two things together. The first publication that I know of is a paper of mine, which appears in two versions in 1994, which adumbrates the idea that there's switch reference. Later papers actually explicitly state so. So in my early paper, I said that converbs are in quasi-suppletive relationship with other non-finite devices. So for instance, in example 11, we have Shutva in the first in A, Pujitaha, which is Shutva being converb, Pujitaha being a ta participle, Gate and C, again a ta participle, and finally Samasadya, again a converb. Let me talk this through in some more detail. So the same subject structures use converbs. This is the case for Shutva and Samasadya. But different subjects use ta participles, as in B and C. Now, how does this work? Converbs are controlled by agents, underlying subjects that are co-referential with agents in the embedded structures. They therefore ensure agent continuity, as in 11a, where the Vakya Visharada, who is listening to Naradasya's speech, is the same subject as the one who hears. On the other hand, transitive ta participles are P-oriented and hence turn this patient or object of the embedded structure into a surface subject of the matrix clause. So therefore, they ensure a shift in perspective from patient to agent. This is the case in 11b. So Narada has been honored in the preceding clause, and now he becomes the agent of this clause. The subject of locative absolute participle structures normally is different from core constituents of the matrix clause. So they being syntactically unconstrained, locative absolutes permit utter shifts in discourse perspective, as in 11c. So Gate tasmin munihi, that sage, with that other chap, namely Narada, gone away, he went to the bank of the Tamasa. Switch reference is not limited in Sanskrit to tail-head linkage, but is also found in ordinary clause chaining, as in example 12 for the converb, and in example 13 for the ta participle. For Hindi Urdu, I've tried my hand at exploring what is happening by asking colleagues and getting their responses. So the result is that switch reference seems to be possible, but apparently is not comfortable for many speakers. And the reason is probably that at least one, maybe two of the available options is inherently ambiguous. Now, converts, of course, normally require underlying subject control. They are therefore used in same subject structures, and as in 14a, because of this fact, they could not be used in different subject structures. So 14b, Sham Ghar Akar, Ramne Apna Kam Shuru Kar Diya is out. So much is clear. What then can be used for different subject marking? One uses the imperfective participle, but this is ambiguous. So Sham ke ghar aate hi can mean both Sham having come home, but also as soon as Sham was coming home. And similarly, the use of the infinitive with case-marked infinitive can be ambiguous, as in Sham ke ghar aane par, which can both mean Sham having come home and as soon as Sham was coming home. Only one structure is unambiguous, and that's because of the semantics of kebat after. So we have Sham ke ghar aane ke baad, Ram apna kaam shuru kar diya. That works. But finite verbs, verb structures as in 15 prime are commonly preferred. Either simple conjunction as in 15a, or a jub-dub relative correlative structure as in 15b. There's a further problem, namely the structures that can be used in different subject contexts and switch reference can also be used in same subject contexts. So for instance, 15 double prime, we have Ghar aane ke baad, Ram ne apna kaam shuru kar diya, where the same subject is found with the subject, with the infinitive followed by ke baad. This is something which will need to be discussed in detail later on. A further Indo-Aryan language from the extreme northwest is Palula, which has been recently studied by Lilia Grain. And he notes that converbs are used in same subjects, contexts as in 16a, and a finite verb followed by a subordinated ta in different subject contexts, as in 16b, where we have jiti as the finite verb, and ta, the subordinator following this. Clearly, more research is needed on modern Indo-Aryan languages beyond the three languages that I have been able to look at. And we now look at Davidian. Steve, in his recent second edition of his Davidian languages, makes two claims here. One is that tailhead linkage is not well investigated in Davidian. This is certainly true, especially for the literary languages, and for these it's difficult to get agreement on data, as I will show. But there is evidence in some of the tribal languages, and some of these have tailhead linkage with switch reference. Thieve also argued that there is no necessary connection between tailhead linkage and switch reference. This is also true to some extent. While some tribal languages have tailhead linkage with switch reference, others do not. So let's look first at languages that have evidence for switch reference and tailhead linkage. I'll just give a list of the languages first and then talk about details. One is Koraga, started by Bhatt 1971. The other one is Tulu, also studied by Bhatt in 1967. There is Malto, studied early on by Mahapatra and later on by Kobayashi. And then possibly there is Kolami, studied by Emino, and Kuruch, studied by Han. So let me start with Koraga. According to Bhatt, there are two converbs, one which he calls continuous or past one, which ends in a, another one which he calls past two, ending in da, dada, or in da. He does not explain what the difference between these would be. When you look at the text which he has from Koraga, we find that these markers are used in tailhead linkage. So the same subject marker dada is found in 17a, bikse padara bakki, and the same subject marker a is found in 17b. And finally, there is a third option, which Bhatt does not talk about, namely the use of the finite verb in 17c, which is the continuation of 17a. So 17a would be bikse padara bakki, having gone, begging he return, and then bakki is picked up in the next sentence and ends then after some objects and so forth with suki, he looked. He looked at his what he had gotten through begging. Now, what Bhatt has not talked about is the fact that is also a different subject marker, which occurs regularly for different subjects, as an example, 17d. So we have Ponaga here. They having gone there was a very big palace. This distribution of same subject and different subject markers is quite regular in the texts, and there are very few exceptions, most of these in dative subject structures, which may go either way. For Tulu, Bhatt gives a converb with same subject markings, a converb ending in te or tu, and a different subject which he calls the naga satellite, which of course ends in the suffix naga. Here, consider the example in 18, which comes from his very short text. The poyeri of the first sentence, they went, is picked up by potu, the same subject converb in the next sentence, and the gopieri of that end of that sentence, they played, is picked up by goputanaga in the next sentence, having played, one girl's hand ring fell. They having played. As I said, Bhatt presents only a very short text and is the only example of switch reference. But he has ample examples of both converbs and naga satellites in his grammar part, and these are consistently of the sort that the converb is used with same subjects and the naga satellite with different subjects. Given the evidence and the adjacent evidence of Karaga, it's legitimate to assume that Tolu has switch reference, but more detailed research would certainly be welcome. This is actually a refrain that more research is needed. Malto has, according to Mahapatra, had a converb ka, which may take pronominal markers. And this is used for same subjects, and a different subject marker, which Mahapatra calls conditional, and which Kobayashi refers to as converb. This ends in ko. Now, according to Mahapatra, the pronominal markers are optional, but in his text, we see that the pronominal markers seem to be obligatory, at least in tailhead linkage. So you can see this in example 19, where we have in the first sentence ending in bitar, they cooked, and this is picked up then by same subject, bitakar, they having cooked, where ka is the converb marker and ra is the third person plural marker for masculine. And then we have mandar, they planted, and that's being picked up in the next sentence by mantko, with a conditional or converb marker and no personal suffix. And that then leads over to the fact that they having planted, the jackal dug up everything, ate it, and fled. Now, the situation has been characterized explicitly as switch reference by Kobayashi. And his data come from a slightly different variety, and in his data, evidently, pronominal marking is obligatory for same subjects. Now, the pronominal marking of same subjects, the fact that same subjects are morphologically more complex than different subjects, is unusual. But Kobayashi provides at least a historical explanation, claiming that, or arguing that the same subject marker ka in origin is a verbal adjective, which can take person markers when used as a predicative adjective, while ko in origin is an adverbial form of the same suffix ka, using the suffix o, and that can be used then as for different subjects. Kodami has thus certain evidence, and to save time, I think I skipped this just to end with the usual remark: a fuller study of Kodami is needed. And I think the same thing I will do for Kuruch, again concluding with a systematic study of the Kuruch situation is needed. Let me briefly mention that there's also evidence for tailhead linkage in Davidian languages without switch reference. Two languages come to mind, Parji and Gonda. I focus briefly on Parji. Parji has a converb in E, which is often followed by kuli or kili, but that's used sentence internally. In tailhead linkage, it uses a temporal or conditional adverb formation in od, or alternatively, a finite verb followed by the conditional adverbial formation of become erod. The tailhead linkage is found quite regularly in the text, but it does not have switch reference alternation. So consider 33, where in the Rome 2, method erod picks up on the preceding menditge, and the next 3, ethet erod, picks up on enditge, and you can see these are same subject markers. You continue the same story. But the same ethet erod, which in 3 was the same subject marker, marks different subject in sentence 4, where we have ethet erod and then tali enda. So they haven't talked to the mother said. And similarly in 5, in this case the bear form in od is used, pokod, they spoke, they having spoken. So you can see there is switch reference, but there is no, there is tailhead linkage, but there is no switch reference. So this raises the obvious question: what about the literary languages? One would expect here tailhead linkage and perhaps even switch reference, at least in folk narratives, but alas, there are no studies of that sort that I have been able to find. Now, the most common linker is the converb, which is commonly assumed to obey the same subject constraint. There are apparent examples of different subject marker, but there doesn't seem to be any detailed linguistic discussion. Attempts to elicit responses from Davidologists have led to mixed results for different subject structures. There's even some disagreement over whether converbs obey the commonly assumed same subject constraint. So let's look first at converbs. The usual view is that they are about same subject if they are plus human, as in 24a, Kumar Inge Vandu and Yene Kupitan. If the subjects are not human, they may be different, as in 24b. And there are special exemptions also for causal relationships, where again the subjects may be different, and some other things of that sort, as in 24c, where the bambu katitu, the biting of the snake, is the cause of the dying of the bayan, of the boy. According to Subramaniam, the converbs can be used in tailhead linkage, as in 24d. This actually is part of a longer series which he concocted as an invented example, but at least one linguist assumes that this is a possibility in Tamil. Now, what about different subject marking? In the literature, you find various examples, various publications that cite occasional examples of different subject structures. Subramaniam actually is the one who states that these can mark another agent occurring, and that the action takes place simultaneously or just before the time of the action of the matrix clause. In the cited examples that are most commonly found, the infinitive is used, as in example 25. First two examples from relatively modern Tamil, third one from Old Tamil, and then an example from Kannada, and even an example from Brahmi. The question is whether this marking can be used in tailhead linkage. So for Tamil, then, I went ahead and used Subramaniam's invented example, and partly with the help of Google Translate, try to change this so that it would be a switch of subjects in the third sentence. The first thing I did was using the converb setu, and predicted that this would be considered to be ungrammatical, and it was considered ungrammatical by many of my consultants, but one speaker, one scholar accepted this as grammatical. Then I tried the infinitive, which had been very common in the examples that I found, and I knew that it could be enlarged by the suffix Again, this on the other hand, now in contrast to the converb, found pretty broad acceptance, but basically preferring the suffix rather than the plain infinitive teia. One scholar proposed the form in D, the past relative participle, followed by a suffix pa, which I assume means something like when or after. And then other scholars accepted this and proposed that instead of pa, pin and piraku can also be used, meaning afterwards. Finally, one scholar proposed the structure in E, using a verbal noun in adu, followed by the suffix So there's an impressive number of options, but the question is which, if any of these, would be used in actual rather than made-up tailhead linkage? Nobody has been able to answer that question for me so far, and maybe some of the members in the audience will have some reactions on that. There's a further problem that many or all of these proposed different subject structures can also be used in same subject contexts, as in 26 prime. So here we have in 26a, the 26 prime A, the infinitive with being used in the same subject context, and in 26 prime B, the verbal noun in also again used for same subjects. So to sum up some of the findings, we can say that the most commonly proposed or accepted structures use infinitives, verbal nouns, or verbal adjectives. But there's nothing to indicate that the different quasi-acceptable solutions are grammaticalized as different subject markers, whether in tailhead linkage or sentence internally. Sentence internally, infinitives plus minus verbal nouns plus minus relative participle plus pa or the like seem to be usable also in same subject context. What's missing are data on folk narratives rather than the made-up examples, and clearly a great amount of further research is here required again. So a brief summary of the Davidian findings. A few languages, Kodaga, Tulu, Malto, have good evidence for switch reference and tailhead linkage. Kolami and Kuduk may perhaps do so too, but the evidence is not very strong. A few languages have evidence for tailhead linkage, but no switch reference, Balji and Kunda. For the rest of the languages, including the literary ones, relevant evidence is lacking. Systematic studies on Dravidian tailhead linkage and switch reference are urgently needed. This brings me to the conclusions and implications for future research. How am I doing for time? I think I'm doing okay. All right. Switch reference appears to be widely distributed in South Asian languages. So much we have seen. It is found in South Munda, in Burushaski, in a number of Tibeto-Burman languages, in Sanskrit, less robustly in Hindi, also in Palula, is found in Koraga, Tulu, Malto, and perhaps more widely in Davidian. There's also a fair amount of uncertainty. Tibeto-Burman and modern Indo-Aryan, for these languages, it's not clear how widespread the switch reference is, whether, as in Munda, there may be differences between languages with and without switch reference, and whether such differences may be correlated with geographic distribution or genetic classification. For Davidian, there are a lot of uncertainties except for Koraga, Tulu, and Balto. In general, more detailed investigations on the various languages and language families of South Asia are urgently needed, including the major literary languages, new and also ancient. Given what I've been able to find so far, such investigations promise to yield interesting results. Now, we could stop here, but I think there is more. Let's look first at same subject marker. It's done by means of converbs, and this is the most stable across South Asian languages. Now, given that converbs cross-linguistically tend to be limited to same subject contexts, this finding is not particularly remarkable. A major exception, and this is remarkable, is Malto, where the unmodified converb is used for different subject marker, and same subject marker requires this addition of personal affix. So same subject marking is marked. Note also that there is some controversy as to whether the same subject constraint holds for converbs in Tamil and perhaps for other languages as well. As far as different subject marking is concerned, we find just a short catalogue of what we've observed. Some of these different strategies conform to cross-linguistic tendencies. Some others are more unusual. Let me take a quick sip of water here. Let me start with the more unusual ones. One is the use of converbs plus an added marker in Kam and Brudashaski. Another one is the use of finite verb plus a subordinator in Palula and Kolami, and also in Parsi, but Parsi does not have switch reference alternations. The more usual ones are converb-like formations in South Munda, Koraga, Tulu, Malto, at least from a synchronic perspective. They are nominalizations, infinitives, verbal adjectives. That's the most common one. I won't go through the whole list. And finally, they're conditional temporal structures in Kolami, Malto, and Parsi. Now, since we started out with Munda, we might return to that and take another look at Munda. Anderson treats the different subject and same subject markers as structurally equivalent and hence classifies the North Munda use of the cognate of this reconstructed same subject marker che as same subject marker, even though North Munda does not have a contrasting different subject marker. Now, there's a possible alternative. What if the absence of the different subject marker were original and its presence in South Munda resulted from an innovation? In that case, the use of Northern Munda che under same subject conditions could be interpreted simply as continuation of an original converb function of the reconstructed suffix che, since converbs prototypically occur under same subject conditions. In fact, Osada, in his investigation of Mundari, interprets the suffix che in that language as a converb suffix. The South Munda value of che as same subject marker then would be a consequence of the development of a contrasting different subject marker, presumably from a marker which originally had different functions. Now, there is support for this alternative, namely the fact that acknowledged by Anderson, that the South Munda suffix na is not limited to different subject marking, but can also be used as conditional or temporal, even with same subjects. That's an example 27. The same argument applies to the possibly non-cognate different subject marker and then or den of Gorum. Moreover, as Anderson notes, this broader, less restricted use of the different subject marker is typical of switch reference in systems in Eurasia. In this regard, note that as we have seen, conditionals temporals are used as different subject markers in other South Asian languages, for instance, Kolami and Malto. Now, the most common pattern of different subject marking involves some kind of verbal noun, verbal adjective, or infinitive. This is true for Burushaski and various other languages. And again, this is consonant with cross-linguistic tendencies. Beyond that, there are three other strategies. One is the use of a post-verbal particle placed after a finite form of the verb. So this we find in Kolami and in Palula. Another strategy found in Tibeto-Burman Kam involves adding an agreement marker to converb formation. Finally, one strategy of Burushaski is to add a subordinator marker to the converb. Interestingly, however, in Malto, the addition of agreement marking to the converb yields a same subject marker. Further research may well uncover yet other strategies. The variety of structures used for different subject marking is remarkable, especially if compared to the simplicity of same subject marking by means of converbs. This fact lends cross-South Asian support to the hypothesis that converb marking, with its preference for subject or agent identity, is primary. Different subject marking, by contrast, looks like a secondary development, drawing on whatever language-specific construction may come in handy to provide a solution to the question asked earlier in this paper, namely, how do you handle different subjects in this context where switch reference is found for using converbs. If this conclusion is correct, it has implications for assessing the widespread occurrence of switch reference in South Asian languages. In some cases, such as Munda and Sanskrit, switch reference might perhaps be inherited, with or without some lexical renewals, but in many others, it may be the result from independent developments in response to the question of how to create a different subject counterpart to the same subject linkage by converbs. At this point, this conclusion must remain speculative. It's only through detailed additional research on a much larger sample of South Asian languages that a more definitive conclusion can be reached. Looks like I have competition from a dog here. Now, there's an additional concern, and noted several times we have seen that markers which are used for different subjects may also be used for same subjects. This is true not only for South Munda, but also for Hindi, the infinitive postposition constructions, Kolami text structures, Tamil infinitive. So, okay. So the question is, how can we be sure that structures of this sort really are different subject markers in switch different systems? So the answer must be that the only context where we can tell is where we have these structures occurring in tail-end linkage, because that's where we are able to say that putative different subject markers occur under the same syntactic and discourse conditions as same subject marking converbs. In the case of South Munda, the evidence of tail-end structures shows that the temporal conditional marker does in fact serve as switch reference different subject marker, but what about other languages? From this perspective, only the following languages can be characterized as having switch reference with any degree of certainty. South Munda, some of the Tibeto-Burman languages, especially Chamling and Zonka, Sanskrit, Kodaga, Tulu, and Malto. Perhaps this list is overly restrictive. However, adopting such a restrictive perspective has the advantage of forcing us to look more closely before we claim that given languages have switch reference. That is, it invites further, more detailed research. The most promising source for conducting relevant research in this regard would be traditional, especially folk narratives, a genre that is most likely to employ switch reference for the purposes of tailored linkage. This context permits determining whether putative different subject markers are used in the same discourse function as same subject markers, as again in the Sanskrit example in 11, and the Malto example in 19. The final conclusion is there is clearly room for further detailed research. Thank you.
You can see something. Oh, Gail has raised the hand.
And here are the references. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Hock. That was a fantastic talk, very illuminating. And you took us into a wonderful journey on switch reference in South Asian languages. It's really interesting to know how it is spread across various language families in South Asia. You showed us evidence from Indo-Aryan, Sanskrit and other modern Indo-Aryan languages, Davidian languages, South Munda, and of course you also established that it has some spreadness in Tibeto-Burman as well. It's very, very interesting to know how languages employ various strategies to address this phenomenon. You also showed that systematic studies are urgently needed when it comes to work on tailhead linkages and switch references. I'm sure there are many questions from the audience.
Yes,
the talk is formally open for discussion.
All right. So, who's asking first?
I see a hand from Gail. Gail Coelho.
All right. Hi, Gail.
Hi. I do want
Do
to
you
point
still
out-
want to keep the presentation on, or do you want to stop presentation?
I can keep it on, yes.
Okay.
In case anybody wants to see something here, yeah. How do I do this?
Can I ask?
I don't want to stop sharing, so. Yes, okay. Why don't you ask? Yes.
Yeah, I want to point out that Betta Kurumba has explicit switch reference in the area of infinitives. I still have to check on the converbs issue, whether there's switch reference there, but infinitives definitely. Because if the embedded clause and the matrix clause have the same subject, then the suffix il is used. And if the embedded clause and the matrix clause have different subjects, the suffix ka is used.
That's interesting because I went through your data, through your short story there in Steva's most recent re-edition, and I couldn't find anything there which seemed to systematically differentiate between same subjects and different subjects. So I appreciate getting the information on this. Thank you.
It'll be in my book on Betta Kurumba, annotated texts in Betta Kurumba, which show plenty of examples.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, Amrit has a question.
Yeah, hello, Amrit.
Hi. No, this is actually
give the
both
this
of us,
also.
Jay and I, have observations rather than questions. One is that the infinitive and the adverb seem to play a part in DS, even in Tamil. I don't know whether my Tamil is going to be intelligible to the Tamil speakers, but you get same subject in something like Anga poi partha theriyum, and you get that in Kannada as well, which means something like if you go there and see, then you will know.
Yeah.
Same
So
subject.
Yeah, it's a temporal adverbial kind of use here.
The partha is actually conditional. There's no adverb in the same subject. There is an adverb in the DS. Anga poi partha yarume illa. I'll hope nodidre yaru illa. That is
translated.
if you go and see there,
Nobody,
was
there's
there.
nobody there.
Nobody was there.
Yeah.
That you
Yes.
can get an overt adverbial there. Anga poi partha po.
Mm.
I'll hope nodidaga. You can get that adverbial in the DS, but not in the SS condition.
Okay, I'd like to see that again. Yes, these will be useful materials for me. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Does
then,
does anybody have evidence or knowledge of what happens in folk narratives in Tamil?
I don't know. We'll have to ask.
somebody like Annamalai would know it, I suppose. And
Yeah, I've been consulting Annamalai, but he didn't particularly help for on this particular account either. He helped on many other counts, but not on this one yet.
yeah, but Hans, one thing I have noticed is that you can get DS, distinct subjects, with when there is a certain temporal marker like conditional.
Yeah.
An example, I have a paper on Malayalam serial verbs, and there I noted that take these two sentences. കാട്ടിൽ ഒളിച്ചിരുന്ന് അവർ പോലീസ് കള്ളനെ പിടിച്ചു. That is, police hiding in the forest, the police caught the thief. In this case, the people who are who is hiding in the forest is the police. So the same thing. Hiding in the forest, the police caught the thief.
Yeah.
But if I add a temporal marker of time, Paul, കാട്ടിൽ ഒളിച്ചിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ പോലീസ് കള്ളനെ പിടിച്ചു. When hiding in the forest, the police caught the thief. And where, in this case, the person who is hiding in the forest could be either the police or the thief.
Right. So again,
I think, the conditional marker there and the temporal marker has something to do with the ability to have DS. Otherwise, almost obligatorily you get SS.
And if I may add a speculation, the marker that you call, you cited somebody as calling the Naga marker.
Naga.
yeah.
I wonder whether the AGA in it is the same as Apol or Aga. In Kannada, it is Aga. And this was.
I suspect something of that sort. I'm just not sure where the N comes from there.
The N would be actually an ending of the verb.
Yeah, but
misanalysis.
I went through the Tulu grammar and I couldn't find a likely place where this N could be in the verbal morphology. Yeah. There is an unu, is an un kind of suffix which is used for continuous present.
Yes.
But that doesn't make overly much sense for the antecedent marker, naga. So and maybe DNS will have some information on this if one asks him, but I don't know how to ask him.
Another speculation here is that, in your constructed examples with Tamil, where if you put an on the verb, it was much more acceptable to people.
Yeah.
The constructed example.
Yeah.
I wonder if that is similar to what happens in Malayalam, where, unlike in my Kannada, Jaishavan needs an aspectual vidu, it, that is leave. That is Maya. What was that?
And that മഴ പെയ്തിട്ട് കുളം നിറഞ്ഞു. Rain, having rained, the pond filled up. So yes,
the wit is not essential for Kannada, for example, in Sridhar's example, or the examples that you cited.
But in Malayalam, it is almost മഴ പെയ്ത് കുളം നിറഞ്ഞു. You can say it without the it, but in colloquial speech, but that is a kind of sort of saving the labor of pronouncing every this thing. But the happy thing to say is Mara Peyit, it is the completion marker.
A kind of
Aspectual completion marker. So aspect and conditionality has much to do with DS.
Yeah, I wonder whether this is maybe partly an innovation, because Baitan, in his grammar of the 30s of the last century, also Caldwell, they used the bare infinitive. And Baitan had something to say on this. I wasn't able to put it into the presentation. It will go into the paper eventually. Namely, that there can be whole sequences of in a story where you use the infinitive when you have a switch of subject. But so that suggests that there may be something there. It's just, again, that he doesn't put it together with the use of the converb and contrast the two things with each other. So it's not clear from his description of whatever version of Tamil that he was looking at the time, whether this was switch reference or not.
Okay, thank you. We'll send you the Tamil examples.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any other responses, questions? Be happy to answer.
Hans, can I ask something? This is Uma.
Yes, Uma.
Yeah. Can we see those Tamil examples you showed? I had some doubts with that. The example where I think it was Krishnamurti's examples, 14C and D.
Okay, can I go? How do I go back to the screen?
Maybe you should press page up.
Oh, I can.
Or you can scroll up.
It's kind of gotten dark on me. That's the problem. Is it still visible on your side?
The Tamil examples where you had that's the one, something to do with going to the temple, having done the puja.
That was Subramanian. Yeah,
Subramaniam. Okay.
Proposed that, and I'm trying to see how I can get back into the.
You can scroll up using the.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Okay. Let's go back here. All right. Where are we? Oh, here. All right. Now, is it visible? Still not visible.
Yes, but not yet, because the example I was interested in was the puja one.
Yeah, right, yeah. What about that? Yes. Yes, what about the example? I can't get to it. For some reason, it doesn't let me go back to my slides.
It's not going back. No, I didn't note down the example, but I was just not convinced with that. And though it was an invented example, and this the use of Seidappa, the adverbial.
Yeah,
that was not.
This was one of the suggestions which I received from colleagues. Yes, with the pa there. Yes.
Yeah, the Seidappa, because I saw even the time adverbial what was used there is not acceptable. That is one thing. It's not natural. It is not
With the pa,
natural.
it's not natural.
And also,
Okay.
yes, another thing is in normal speech in Tamil, we do not repeat the events. Like we would not say கோயிலுக்கு போயிட்டு கோவில்ல பூஜை செஞ்சு. We will not repeat the object again. So that was very unusual to see that, even though it was an invented example. Yeah. Oh, okay. Now we can see you, but not. So the basic idea was not to that example. The formation of the structure itself, in my opinion, was not natural. So it would be interesting to see that again, both the infinitive form and also the adverbial form.
I could not actually find what that part was supposed to do and what kind of suffix it was. It's not listed.
I think because I don't remember the construction, otherwise I would have given you the right form now. But I noted it down as 14C and D. It was in the DS marking, right? 14C and D in your example.
Let's see what I can get that. 14C and D.
You stopped presenting to us. Maybe 14, if you start presenting again.
Yeah, 14.
You have stopped your presentation.
Yeah, for some reason it's not coming up anymore.
Can you do the share present now? You can use that button, present now.
Present now. Okay, there we are. All right, yeah. Allow. Okay, here we are, yes. 14 is Hindi, okay. So maybe it's a different
it's different in Tamil. You can scroll down.
Okay, it's Tamil, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we have the.
Yes. This is one of the examples, but the next one I was more interested in that.
So we can get there now.
Seidappa.
Okay, here we are. This is the first one that only one scholar accepted this. I think that person has a belief that there is no same subject constraint for converbs in Tamil, and he feels that way about other languages too.
But even this one, I do not know how that one person. This is not acceptable to me, especially the Seidu.
Yeah, precisely.
Here also the same. I would go like what Jaishilan said for Malayalam. Seidu vittu. That vittu will also be here. Aspectual completion part.
Yeah, it was surprising to me, but this scholar, I can name him, this Annamalai, believes that this is simply a myth that there is a same subject constraint for the converb. So let's turn to the but here's the one with the pa. Yeah.
This Seidappa. This is the one because here avargal mudalil koilukku povargal. I would drop this koilukku. I would not use the dative form here. Avargal mudalil koilukku povargal. Poi பூசை செய்வார்கள். பூசை செய்தப்ப நாங்கள் அவர்களை. We cannot say செய்தப்ப. This is wrong for me because செய்தவுடன் after they worship. So I would not even use the Sedappa here. Sedappa means doing, while doing. You don't take while doing the puja someone to the shop.
Yeah, so
puja is
others propose is to use pin or piraku instead.
Say the pin or say the pyramid. Yes. So I wouldn't even say alternatives. I would say those are the forms. Sedappa is unacceptable here.
All right, yeah, good, okay.
Because while Sedappa means when doing puja, you're taking somebody to shop. It's not possible. So.
Okay.
So that would be my reading. The previous example also the same. This womb, Seidadum Nangal Avargalai. Seidadum is fine. This womb is fine.
Yeah.
This is fine. Yeah, this is just a minor observation, but it is interesting to see that Tamil uses different constructions for expressing.
This is the common pattern with things of this sort. That different speakers coming from maybe different backgrounds don't always agree with each other. The important thing, of course, here, which I was trying to show, is that there are a number of different options which could be used, but it's not clear to me that any of these has been grammaticalized as a different subject marker in switch reference. You know, so because especially since these temporal adverbial kind of temporal conditional kind of things also can be used with same subjects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, same subject is fine, but I find it very unnatural because instead of we would use serial verb constructions to make it more natural.
That was one concern. I started out with what Subramaniam proposed, and of course, Subramaniam, I think, is what is his native language?
Subramaniam, Tamil.
Tamil, so he should know, yeah. But he made up these examples, and what can I say? I used what I had. Okay, yeah, we do it, but we commonly use it, yes. But that's I left that simply because he had it that way, and one speaker at least considers to be okay. So let's go with that.
All right. Yeah.
My focus, of course, was not on that, but on the question of can you have a different subject marking here, and if so, what are the options?
Yeah, there you would have same subject marking. Anyway, thank you. So looks like we have another question from Shailendra. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sir, I would like to try to understand that whether something like a case marking system has something to do with this switch reference, because perhaps nominative accusative languages perhaps has more than adjective absolutely. That's why perhaps in Hindi we do not find. And number two question, whether the linearity is the two clauses should be adjacent is a something like a essential condition for having a switch referencing.
Okay, well, I think in tailored linkage, clearly there is linearity involved because you have one earlier sentence which ends in a verb, and then you kind of repeat it in non-finite form at the beginning of the next sentence as an indication that the story goes on. So in that sense, you know, there is a built-in linkage sequence. Ordinary use of converbs is such that there is a kind of canonical form where the converb has to precede the main verb. But you can extrapose converbs to post-verbal position.
Yes.
And this is easier in some of the South Asian languages than in others. And this is especially, it gets to be a problem when you have diglossia, where in diglossic languages with diglossia, there tends to be more of a kind of use of canonical usage in written form. And it's often difficult to get the cases of exposition unless it's heavy noun shift kind of things, heavy constituent shift things. So years back, I was investigating some issues of word order in Canada, and a student of ours, Nalini Rao, was giving me the kind of typical examples where only the subject can be extraposed after the verb. And I said, but so-and-so had said that in colloquial language, anything can be postposed. And she said, oh, I wish she had said colloquial language. And she had to force herself to use colloquial language in an interview situation, which as a linguist she could do. And she came up with all kinds of examples where things follow the verb, including the Kannada counterpart of the Hindi expression, denge tumhe chanta, which is something which I remember my wife saying to our son when he was young and being misbehaving, where the both tumhe and chanta are postposed after the verb. So in diglossic languages, when people focus on the written form, on the literary form of the language, many of these things are much more restricted than they are in the colloquial language. I'm not sure that it answered your question, but that's kind of something about sequencing of constituents, which I can add here.
And is there a case marking, something like involved in this switch referencing with a nominative, accusative, or something like alignment type?
Well, the switch reference is not dependent on the issue of alignment.
Okay.
So take, let's say, Kodaga, which is accusative language.
Okay.
It has switch reference, and take Sanskrit, which is perfective past, which is ergative. Sanskrit also has switch reference, so it's not dependent on that. What happens in Sanskrit simply is, as would be the case in other languages of that sort, is that it is not this surface subject which controls, but rather the underlying subject, or what in Sanskrit is called the kartri or the karta, the agent.
Fine. Thank you, sir.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah. Any other question? We have a message for you in the... Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I heard my own voice. I had an echo. There is a message in the chat box. I think it's from Prabal Dasgupta. Prabal, are you there? It says, like, can I request Professor Hock to share the slides presented? It would be very helpful in further study. So this is something, if it is Prabal, maybe you can send it to him on some different name.
Yeah.
Hello?
So if you are interested in getting slides, you might want to contact me. I didn't put the email account there. It's hhhock@illinois.edu. That's my email account. So if you send me a message, I can. I have at least a preliminary, almost final version of the slides, which is compact rather than this blown up thing that I have presented here, and therefore won't be a major problem sending by email.
Yeah. Is there any other question?
You're welcome. Mukta said thank you. I responding, thank you. You're welcome. Okay.
That is great. That's great.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for listening and for the comments. And I look forward to written emails telling me some of the details, which will be helpful for the final version of this paper.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you so much for taking your time off from your busy schedule, and it's early morning for
It is
you.
very early morning. Being
I
retired,
appreciate
I don't usually get up at
Thank
this
you.
time.
I know it was too early for you, but I really appreciate that. And it was lovely listening to you. And as you pointed out, I think it's important for us to look deeper into this phenomenon and would like to see if this is really one of the common features found among Indian languages. Is it going to be an aerial feature or not? I think it's something you have opened up the doors for people to explore this further and come out with interesting results. I once again thank you very much on behalf of
You're welcome.
and on behalf of
thank you for listening.
here. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Super.
I also think
Thank you, Hans. Your lectures are always informative, insightful, and illuminative. Illuminating.
well,
Yes.
There's work for you to do.
Yes. There is a lot of work to do for all of us to do. But it's very, you have covered a lot, very exhaustive. And I know how much work you must have put in, or you have been putting for years and years and years.